Hey everyone, good evening. Welcome back to the live streams. It's been a minute, and if you're in the live stream, if you could please let me know if I'm coming through loud and clear and if you can see me okay. I think I've got audio. I think it's good, but I'd like to just hear someone confirm it. It's been a minute since I've been doing this. And again, welcome back. So glad it's been a while since I've done a live stream, but I appreciate you all being here tonight. Hey, Stephanie, thank you so much for confirming. Appreciate that very much. And I hope you all are doing well. I thought I'd just take an hour tonight to sort of talk through some thoughts about all the things that are going on. Hey, Alex. Hey, Tony. Thank you so much for joining. I feel like this has been such an intense time that it might be a good idea and a good time to just kind of talk through some of the things that we're all facing. This is such an incredibly crazy, bizarre time in our history. And it feels like every time you look at the news, your life kind of feels a little bit more anxious. And there's already stuff going on in all of our lives that are giving us anxiety, but the world as a whole just feels like it's going crazy. And I always go back to that quote in one of the Batman movies where they're talking about why does the Joker, why does he want to do all this stuff? And Alfred says, Master Wayne, some people just want to see the world burn. And I feel like we see that in real time every day. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy. So anyway, I'm going to share a few thoughts and I'm going to try my best. I know that in the past, I've had the issue where I sometimes have someone come in the chat and just, try to create trouble. So I'm going to try to keep an eye on that as well. But I just thought I'd talk through a few things that are on my heart. And I'd love to see any comments that you have regarding this. But we'll go for about an hour and it knocks up my anxiety meds. Yeah. Yes, I think we all need to have something or at least cut back on our caffeine. But tonight's live stream, again, is called No Kings, Including Jesus. And I'm sure that title rings very relevant to what we've just seen this past weekend, as well as what we're seeing in general. And, it's supposed to ring true because we are living in a moment when American democracy is definitely under direct assault. Excuse me, not just from the corrupt politicians, but also from just billionaires who rig the economy, from a growing movement that wants to replace the Constitution with some kind of divine order, replace democracy with religious rule. And that movement is going to say that it's about faith, but we know in reality it's about fear. It's about power. It's about control and obedience. This is definitely a time when fear has become a currency. People are afraid for their rights, afraid for their children's future, afraid for their future, afraid of losing what little stability that we have left. And I think the people in power know it. They're not trying to calm our fears. They're trying to feed it and amplify it. And they're using it to justify more surveillance, more censorship, more repression. And it's really striking when you realize that the people in power that are supposed to have your best interest at heart are committed to terrorizing you. It's just like, how is this even possible? I still honestly can't believe that he was actually ever a real candidate in the first place. But the idea that he's in charge now and that people are lining up, beneath him is really bizarre to me. It's painful. And I think for those of us who are in the deconversion community, there's some elements to this that are really kind of scary with some of the things that you say, So you're just going to take a quick look at the comments. Looks like Greta says, I went to the protest in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That's awesome. Stephanie was at the one in Dallas, Texas. That's awesome. Very cool. Very, very cool. I couldn't attend them myself at the moment due to some complications, but I would have loved to have been at one of them. And I'm so proud of you that did. I hope there's a lot more of them. And I hope that the crowds just grow and grow and grow. Hope they all stay super peaceful at all times, obviously, but I hope they grow. And I hope that our voice just gets so clear that they can't ignore it anymore. But, at the center of all this, there's really a twisted fusion of politics and religion. We've been talking about that on our channel here for a while. And other channels in the community have been talking about it. But, Christianity is being used as a blunt instrument of state control. And, we know that this isn't new, the idea of, divine rule goes way back. I remember from my time in history class reading about so many rulers that would use the idea that God is behind me and God has picked me. God has put me in place for this reason, and therefore you need to obey me. It goes very far back in world history. And I think we all know that America was founded to reject that, directly reject that. But we have unfortunately let it seep into our history several times in some pretty horrific ways. And it's, I think, time to stay true. No kings, no popes, no theocracy. No one gets to rule just because, God said so or God set him up. And that's kind of the promise of this wonderful country. But it's a promise that's very much under threat. And a lot of us are feeling so stressed and anxious and angry and helpless right now. The noise, the confusion, the manufactured culture wars, the nonstop flood of crises. That's not just chaos. That's part of their strategy. It's about keeping all of us distracted while the power consolidates behind closed doors in the hands of people who claim to speak for a God. But really, it's just tyrants who want more power. So tonight we're just going to talk through a few aspects of it pretty quickly. We're going to move fast. As you all know, my channel is not, by and large, regarding politics. I do have another channel that I've developed somewhat. I'm going to be rethinking how I develop it due to some changes, but I feel like it's, at the moment, it just feels like it's time to bring it in a little bit. I don't want to shift the gears of the main focus of my channel, but I feel like it's a good time to talk about it because this is starting to affect atheists. This is starting to affect the fact that we are being directly threatened as people who are not Christian. Your freedom of speech is being threatened, and mine certainly is, and certainly those with platforms are noticing some of the verbiage that comes out, and it's very, very destructive. It's very un-American, and it blows me away. This is not supposed to be, though, a message of despair, but just it's a message of defiance. The power belongs to us, we the people. So the first thing that really came to my mind was that there's this myth. Everything, of course, we talk about on my channel goes back to the fact that there's so many myths in the Bible, myths that in our culture that sort of grew out of that. But there's this myth of divine authority in politics. If we want to understand why so much of American politics feels so unhinged, I think a really good place to start is the myth of divine authority, the belief that certain leaders and movements and laws are ordained by God. And in that sense, it's almost like they don't think that they have to answer to the people or even the Constitution. They're answering to a higher power. And I see that as a direct assault on democracy. This is the kind of thinking that historically gave us kings and emperors and inquisitions, the divine right concept. The divine right of kings was a license to rule without consent. God picked me, and to question me is to rebel against God. And also God has given me the sword so I can do whatever I want with it, because I'm God's man. I'm the incarnation, as it were, of what he would do if he were here. And that idea is fundamentally incompatible with democracy, where the people are the highest earthly authority, and legitimacy comes from public trust, not from some supernatural endorsement. But today in the US, we're seeing a modern version of that same old myth. It's a version that's dressed up in American flags. It's wrapped up in Bible verses. It's pumped through the veins of this 24/7 outrage machine. We hear it in speeches. The idea, the concepts, either the direct quotes or the concepts like God's on our side. This nation was founded on biblical values. God chose me to lead. Let's be clear. When someone claims that in a democracy, they're not just expressing their personal faith. They're really trying to place themselves above accountability. Because if they're going to argue that they're doing God's direct will, then who can really argue with them? The courts, the media, the voter. It becomes a shield against criticism and a sword against dissent. And it works for a lot of people. Christians that really are tired of Christianity not having the front and center stage, they sign up for this like crazy. They drink the Kool-Aid. And that myth is being used right now to strip away our civil rights, to try to push religious doctrine into public schools, to ban books, to criminalize even aspects of healthcare, which is so sick, and to roll back so many hard-won freedoms like for ethnic minorities, for women, for the LGBTQ plus community, and eventually, again, even anyone that's just not aligned with at least a profession of Christianity. It's coming. Politics that can't survive open debate are now being justified with claims of moral truth handed down from God. And people who disagree with them aren't just political opponents, they're like heretics or worse. Some people see us as threats to a sacred order, and that's how you get violence. That's how you get authoritarianism. That's how you get Gaza. That's how you're going to lose your freedom of speech in this country. And we absolutely do not want that. And we will do everything we can to speak up. But we've seen it before in history books and headlines. We know how this ends, and it's not a pretty picture. And the moment someone says, my power comes from a God, they stop believing that they need the people's permission to use it. That's just a monarch in disguise. And I think it's critical to say, the truth that has to be pointed out is that no one speaks for God in a democracy. Not your senator, not your pastor, not your president. Authority comes from the people, from consent, from reason, from the rule of law, not from a divine revelation. The myth of divine authority belongs in the past, where it can't hurt anybody anymore. And if we don't end it, it will keep hurting everything that democracy was meant to protect. And I think that's a good starting point to this. See if there's any comments here that I missed here, and I'll go and keep moving. The other side says politics is fake. Neither party cares about us. I guess I forgot I can put these comments up real quick. I'm sorry. I haven't done a live stream in about, I think, a month and a half or 2 months, so I'm a little bit out of my habit. If you aren't rich as F, you are as far as the elite's concerned. Oh, if you aren't rich, it's F you as far as the elites are concerned. Yeah, they want to consolidate the power, and anyone that gets in their way, they're just going to steamroll them. Let's see here. Adrian, please have on Life Take Two podcaster. She was a Mormon for 40 years and an ex-Trump supporter, now an atheist and progressive activist. Okay, thank you. I will look that person up. Yeah, Greta says, I don't want a theocracy in the U.S. Yeah, it's going to be just awful if it keeps moving that direction. No kings includes Dems rigging 2000 is pretty. I would disagree with that. Hard on my sleeves. But anyway, I'm going to keep moving. I think another big thing that came to my mind as I thought about what to talk about for sort of the no kings reflection is that we're all acknowledging that we're involved in the rise of Christian nationalism. That's what this basically is about. It's an ideology, but it's also a takeover strategy. They want to take over the world. And I hope that some of you understand that that isn't just an aspiration. Like for some people, they just really want that. They want Christians to rule. But for some people, it's actually like an obligation because of their end times beliefs. A lot of people believe that Jesus is coming back someday, but not in the blink of an eye anytime like the rapture. Like, who knows? It could be in the next 5 minutes. That's not what all Christians believe. Some of them believe that they need to take over the world for Christ, and according to their interpretation of scriptures, that's when Christ will come back, when the earth is filled with the knowledge of the Lord, and when everyone is a believer, then Jesus will come back. And so they're compelled, not just because they don't they don't like gay people, or they're scared of homosexuality or something. They're afraid of giving trans rights. They're not just uncomfortable and wanting 1950s Leave It to Beaver Christianity kind of stuff. They truly, literally believe that they will usher in the return of Christ, and that's scary. That's really scary. But this is the belief as well that the United States is not just influenced by Christian values, but it belongs to Christ, and by extension belongs to Christianity and to Christians. And that leads directly to any other religion or no religion being unwelcome. And in their opinion, it's un-American. It's un-American to be unchristian. That's religious supremacy. They want far more than just influence. They don't want a voice at the table. They don't even want the majority voice at the table. They want the only voice at the table. They want control over the laws, over education, over sexuality, over identity, over women's bodies, over women's rights to vote, over historical narratives. And they're not just doing this by preaching in churches, but by embedding themselves deep into the political machine. The lobbying groups, school boards, maybe state legislatures, federal judges. And it hasn't happened overnight. I know this is not news to most of you. Excuse me, but for decades, we've seen this. The religious right is pouring resources into the strategy, training candidates, pushing laws, electing judges who interpret the Constitution through some kind of theological lens or very close to it. And now we're seeing the results. Roe versus Wade got overturned. States are banning gender-affirming care. Schools are being forced to display the Ten Commandments. Church doctrines are being used to shape civil law. When faith becomes a weapon, I think those of us, at least who were Christians before, we would argue it really ceases to be faith. The Jesus that many of these people claim to follow has been replaced with this warrior Messiah who punishes enemies and hands out kingdoms. They're not even subtle about it. I mean, some of these slogans, like "Let's make America a Christian nation again," or "God, guns, and Trump." We've got politicians quoting scripture to justify political violence. And we've got lawmakers saying separation of church and state is a myth. We've got school boards banning books because they contradict biblical truth. That is not religious freedom. That is Christian nationalism. And the scary thing is, I don't think a lot of Christians realize it doesn't actually matter in the long run, even if you're a Christian, because that's not what this is about. You can be a Christian and still be a target, which is crazy to think about. But if you're a Christian who happens to be a liberal Christian, or you really believe in democracy or in inclusion, or in freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, this movement doesn't want freedom for Christians. It wants power for a specific kind of Christian. It's a version that will punish any differences, and it will see disagreement as rebellion against God. So, our call, I think, is clear to name this stuff, to name it and expose it, to fight it with the law as much as we can, to do peaceful protests, to have public pressure, and just to tell the truth. This country belongs to everyone, not just those who claim a certain religion or some kind of divine privilege. This country is ours. We love it, and we want to keep it safe for everyone. And I think that leads directly to the next thing I was going to say, which is that I think they're using Jesus as a political tool. And I know, again, some of the stuff I'm saying is obvious, and you're all probably saying it and thinking it too. But just to elaborate a little bit on some of these points, I think it's amazing to me, and some of us are just shocked at how this dangerous twist has occurred in modern American politics, where Jesus, who openly rejected worldly power, he said, "My kingdom is not of this world." He's been rebranded as a mascot for authoritarian rule. I mean, let's just take a moment to remember the actual Jesus from the Bible. And I know this is a little different from my normal speech, my normal way of doing it. I know it's possible Jesus didn't even exist, and I know Jesus did say some things that could be interpreted as violence. So I'm not trying to slice and dice every single verse out there. I'm just saying, in general, the original Jesus that was portrayed was a radical, anti-establishment figure who preached to the poor, healed the sick for free. He challenged the religious authorities, and he said that his kingdom was not of this world. He wasn't rich. He didn't hang out with the elites. He didn't carry a sword. He didn't run for office. He was a peaceful person. And if that was the real person who he was, I mean, my best guess is if there was a Jesus, he was probably a very interesting esoteric preacher, and he rubbed people the wrong way and eventually got crucified for it, which is sad. But the Jesus that they're promoting today by Christian nationalists is a completely different character. He's anti-immigrant. He's anti-LGBTQ+. He's anti-choice. He's white. He's angry. And apparently he votes Republican. This version of Jesus is just a tool. It's just a symbol that's been stripped of nuance and turned into a political brand. Politicians are invoking his name not to inspire compassion or humility or because they even really believe. They just want to justify dominance. And when Jesus has become a brand, and people are going to put that all over their shirts and their hats and their slogans, even in church, When Jesus is now a brand, people stop thinking critically. They stop questioning policy. Because if Jesus supports it, then who are you to argue? I mean, Jesus, he's the top guy. He's the top gun. He's everything. If he's in cahoots with Trump, if he's saying Trump's my guy, then who's going to argue? But that's the point. It's not about religion. This is about obedience. If you say this is what Jesus wants, then suddenly every disagreement becomes a spiritual threat. Now you're not just someone with a different view. You're a sinner and you're a heretic. You're an enemy of God. And that framework justifies everything from book bans to death threats. And we see this in how Jesus gets used during the election cycles. Suddenly Jesus is pro the border wall. Suddenly he's against student loan forgiveness. Suddenly he wants prayer in schools. Suddenly he's disappointed in trans kids. And somehow this Middle Eastern peasant has the same exact political opinions as a Fox News host. It's absurd, but it works because it bypasses your rational thought and goes straight to emotional manipulation. That's what this has all been about. This political Jesus is being used. He's just a tool. And I should also mention here, he's hyper masculine. He's tough. He fights. He punishes. You expect to see him in some kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger look. Like, that's not an accident. It reinforces patriarchy and violence and control. They're turning Christianity into a battlefield instead of a sanctuary. It's not about love or justice. It's about who has the power to rule. And the people that are pushing this do not want him questioned. They want him enthroned as a king, not as a peaceful teacher. But that's the thing. Jesus didn't want a throne. He flipped over the tables. He criticized the hypocrites. He chose the company of outcasts. He didn't want to run the empire. He wanted to free people from it. And again, I know I'm being very generic, and I personally question if Jesus even existed, but the character that we know of, that if there was a guy, what was he like? I doubt that he would have supported any of this. I doubt that there was any way he would have been anything like these people. So when we hear someone saying Jesus supports that law or that party or that president, that stance, are you using Jesus to challenge power, or are you using him to excuse it? Because I think when Jesus becomes a political weapon, faith dies, basically. And in its place, you just get a flag-draped idol that only serves the powerful. This is about idolatry. This is all about idolatry. Trump is the new idol. He's the new golden calf. I'm going to go real quickly to some comments before I move on to my next thought. Greta says, as a naturalized U.S. citizen and former immigrant from Germany, I find the current developments disheartening. Yeah, it's very, very disheartening. Agreed. Tony says, Christian nationalism is extremely dangerous. It will be the state religion, a national cult of the worst kind. Yeah, agreed. Thank you, James. Appreciate you being here. Very much so. Dark God 646, the manipulating Christian minds is to see people go crazy over the rapture. Yeah, that rapture stuff the last week or two was crazy. He-Man, master of the political universe. Just June says, as an ex-JW of 45 years, out now 7 years, we weren't allowed to vote or get involved in politics. Now that I can, what's happening is so frustrating. Wow, that's amazing. It's crazy. And just June, if you are interested in sharing your story sometime on my channel, just reach out. I'm on Facebook. My handle is @HarmonicTim. All one word, just @HarmonicTim. But moving on, again, just some of these thoughts, we could dive into these for hours or even weeks. I'm just going to keep going through. But I think we need to point out at this point that I don't think the founders' intent was for a theocracy. They didn't want a king. They were going away from the King of England. But there's a lot of revisionist history that's floating around right now. People claiming that the United States was founded as a Christian nation, that the Constitution was inspired by the Bible, that the founding fathers were just a bunch of evangelical prophets trying to build a holy kingdom. The founders were not trying to build a theocracy. They were running away from one. Most of them had lived under monarchies where the church and state were fused together, where kings ruled by divine right and dissent was heresy. And they knew exactly what it meant to live under religious tyranny. They knew how religion could be weaponized to crush free thought, to deny education, to control women, and to justify violence. And that's why they didn't just omit religion from the Constitution. They actively separated it from government. That's the very first line of the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. No official religion, no forced prayers, no state-sponsored God. They were not trying to silence religion. They were trying to protect freedom by keeping government and religion in separate lanes, and they should be. And they didn't just protect the Christian majority. They protected Jews, Muslims, atheists, deists, spiritual seekers, agnostics, anyone who believed in whatever they wanted to believe. Now, some of those founders were religious, and some of them were deists. Some were not. Some were, united in their Christianity to some level. But what united them in the biggest sense for what they did for our country was they had a shared distrust of religious power being tied to political authority. Thomas Jefferson, I have a quote here. He says, "I've sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." I have sworn, and again, he's saying he believes in this God, but I've sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man. So he believed in a God, the God of Christianity in some sense, probably the deistic side of it, but he's saying that God, I have sworn to him, I'm not going to let tyranny take over this country. I'm not going to let it take over the mind of man. Religious tyranny, I think, was the furthest thing that from their minds in terms of what they hope for our country. James Madison, the father of the Constitution, he warned us that religion and government corrupt each other when they mix. He said, religion and government will both exist in greater purity the less they are mixed together. Again, religion and government will both exist in greater purity the less they are mixed together. And those weren't fringe ideas. They were foundational principles that ensured that no one could claim to rule in the name of God. Because once that door opens, it never closes without bloodshed or everyone being imprisoned. It's insane. It's insane to think about the possibilities of how bad this could get. And Christian nationalists today are trying to kick that door open again. They're claiming America belongs to one faith. And it's not even just one, it's one particular slice and interpretation of one faith. They're demanding that schools teach biblical values that reflect God's will and that leaders pledge loyalty not just to the Constitution, but to Christ. That is not patriotism. That's theocracy. And it's exactly what the founders warned us about. And if you want to honor the people who built this country, don't just quote them out of context. Listen to what they feared. They understood how bad this could get. Understand what they fled and defend what they created, a nation with no king on any thrones, no priest behind the curtain, just people governing themselves, free to believe or not believe, without punishment or privilege. And once we start crowning religious belief as law, we're betraying the Constitution, and we are digging the grave of democracy. And that is not what we want for our country. And that's why we speak up. That's why we speak up and do what we can. As powerless as we sometimes feel, we do what we can to keep these conversations going, because the more that we talk about it, the more educated we get, the more that there are peaceful rallies, the more our voices come together and say, we will not let this country turn into an autocracy. We will not let the reality of what's happening be lied about. Like these rulers are terrorizing their own people. They're terrorizing their own people, and they deserve to be held to account for it. I said this before, and I'm just going to expand on it a little bit, but anxiety as the way that they're trying to rile up the country, that is a feature. That is not a bug. That is not, well, we were hoping to do this, kind of calmly. No, they want people anxious on purpose. If you and I feel overwhelmed, anxious, constantly on edge about what's happening in this country, number one, we're not alone. We have each other. But here's the hard truth. That isn't just a side effect. It's an actual tool. It's a specific tool that they have crafted. It's a tactic. It's a feature. Authoritarian movements, if I can speak correctly, they don't thrive when people are calm and clear-headed. They thrive in chaos, in fear, and in environments where everything feels like it's about to collapse. When the rules are changing too fast for people to notice what's coming and what's going, nothing feels safe. And in that state, people stop thinking critically. They're in fight or flight every day, every minute. And they start looking for strongmen, for saviors, for someone to tell them what to believe and who to blame. That's by design. The people in power want you stressed and exhausted, because when you're in survival mode, you're easier to manipulate. You're more likely to accept extreme solutions, to trade your freedom for order and calm, to believe that the loudest voice in the room is the one that you should be listening to and following, even if it's lying to your face. I mean, look at the tactics: constant culture wars, manufactured moral panics, fake threats to family values or children's safety or religious freedom. They flood the zone with fear. Trans people, immigrants, books, vaccines, drag queens, doesn't matter. The goal is to keep you emotionally hijacked so they can pass these laws, stack the courts, consolidate power, white power usually, while you're too distracted to fight back. And religion, specifically weaponized Christianity, is central to that strategy. Because when anxiety is paired with religious absolutism, it becomes more powerful. It creates an intense us versus them mentality. It makes political disagreement feel like spiritual warfare. It encourages people to see obedience not as submission, but as faith. And that's why so many Americans right now not just feel politically stressed, but morally concerned. Like we're watching our rights slip away while we're being told it's all part of some divine plan. We're gaslit by leaders who tell us everything's fine while they turn up the heat 1 degree at a time. So if you feel anxious and I feel anxious, that's not a sign that we're weak. It's a sign that we're awake. But that awakeness and awareness is not enough. We have to name the strategy. We have to understand that this is constant emotional warfare that is being waged on us on purpose. And we have to resist it, not just by talking about it and being involved and doing peaceful rallies, but by not checking out. Like, make the conscious choice. I will not check out. I will not get so overwhelmed by this that I will just step back and say, I can't do it anymore. We have to consistently, calmly choose clarity over chaos, asking good questions, slowing the panic, break the doom scrolling. We need to get informed, not just inflamed. I'm not saying there's not a righteous anger that we could have in a sense, but the people trying to turn America into a Christian kingdom need you and I to be afraid. That's their fuel. The antidote is not more fear. It's truth and action and solidarity and calm reflection and speaking calmly with good information and going back to the Constitution, going back to the rights that we have and exposing them for who they are. We don't fight authoritarianism by being tougher than it. We fight it by refusing to be tricked into begging for a savior in the first place. Truth has to win here, but we have to be involved in keeping the truth front and center. I'm going to just say a few more things here, but I'm going to go to the comments here. Let's see here. Ex-cult Carol, many Magas have never read the Bible or history book. I wouldn't be surprised. To them, Trump's words are a good enough Bible to them. No kings. Yeah, absolutely. Christians claiming Jesus as king. Are they not making Jesus of this world? Yeah, they're definitely bringing Jesus as the earthly king of this world. It's always about them getting free labor. Tony, agree about chaos and anxiety. Yeah, politics is frustrating, but we are all out here together. Yeah, we definitely need to stick together and just do as much as we can. Yeah, all of us are here together. And Adrian said, agreed, life take two, a harrowing but hopeful story. Thank you. I'll definitely reach out to them. So I did want to mention just a couple of other points. The next one in my thought was that, faith-based governance, the governance where Christians are kind of saying, God is telling, God put me here in the first place, but he's also telling me how to govern, telling me how to change the rules. It's basically the equivalent of decisions that are made without evidence. These are evidence-free decisions. To them, it's probably comforting. Faith-based governance. It gets thrown around by politicians a little bit when they're trying to sound moral or principled or even compassionate. But when you really scratch the surface and get down to it, what it really means is the laws are not made by evidence or data or logic. They're made by belief. personal religious belief. And that's a problem, because when lawmakers start basing public policy on their private faith, we all lose the right to live by our own reason, our own values, and our own truth. Government is supposed to be secular, not anti-religious, but neutral. It's supposed to be grounded in facts and rights and science and outcomes. But faith-based governance skips all that. It says we don't need to test this or study this or prove this. We just believe it's right. And that's how you get policy that actively harms people. Take reproductive rights. The bans that we're seeing across the country aren't based on medical consensus or public health research. They're rooted in religious dogma. And they're getting worse. I hope you are seeing that. They're getting worse. They ignore the complexities of pregnancy, the advice of doctors, the autonomy of patients. In this framework, a belief about when life begins is more important than everything else, including actual life. Or look at LGBTQ plus rights. Laws banning gender-affirming care or restricting trans identities in schools aren't based on peer-reviewed studies. They're based on moral panic, on religious discomfort with people who don't fit into the binary traditional molds. And instead of asking what policies will keep people safe and respected and healthy, faith-based governance says, what does God want? And in areas like climate change, education, public health, and more, we're seeing these trends. Faith-based leaders denying science, rewriting textbooks, hiding old reports, refusing to act on gun violence because they'd rather pray about it than legislate around it. And every time the same message is sent, belief is enough, evidence is optional. But we know that is, number one, an incredibly sick perspective, a sick worldview that will lead to our country's just demise in so many ways, so many areas. But faith has no built-in mechanism for self-correction, and that's what's scary. Science can self-correct, laws can self-correct, democracy self-corrects, but belief doesn't require proof. And when it's used to govern, it doesn't leave room for disagreement. And then when you combine it with political power, it becomes ideological tyranny. Questioning the law becomes questioning God. And that's how free societies can never, ever function. You can believe whatever you want. That's your right. You should have always have that right. But when you're making decisions for everyone else, those decisions have to be grounded in reality, not some kind of divine revelation that you think you've gotten. Once someone's belief becomes law, truth becomes negotiable. And people suffer. Not just those who disagree, but even those who don't fit the mold, who are close but not quite, who don't share the dogma or that interpretation of the dogma, people who dare to think for themselves. We don't need faith-based governance. We need reality-based governance, rooted in evidence, empathy, and the idea that no one belief system gets to define what freedom looks like for the rest of us. That should be obvious. It should be critically obvious. But unfortunately, it's not, and that's sad. A few quick comments. Belief in oligarchs. Yeah. Stephen, great to see you. It's been a minute. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's see here. Based on science, sex is bimodal and not binary. When they say it's basic biology, they never went past high school biology. I'm going to hold off on comments on that topic, but see here. Do you know Representative James Talrico? I have seen a bunch of his videos. I don't know like everything he stands for, so I wouldn't want to, try to say too much because I'm sure I'd misrepresent him, but I've seen maybe 15 to 20 of his videos over the last few months. So I've seen some pretty cool stuff that he said. Yeah. I wanted to mention real quick too, there are religious exemptions and special privileges that are coming into play here. One of the quietest, but definitely corrosive forces that's undermining equality in America is the idea that religion, and again, specifically certain religions, deserve special treatment. If someone claims their actions are faith-based, if I can speak again, they can opt out of the rules that the rest of us have to follow. That's what religious exemptions are. On paper, they sound reasonable. Like, let's protect people from having to violate their conscience. But they're really just legal loopholes to discriminate, to avoid accountability, and to put religious beliefs above civil rights, above science, and even above public safety. You look at healthcare. Hospitals with religious affiliations, many of which serve entire communities, routinely deny reproductive services or birth control or gender affirming care, even life-saving procedures, not because they're medically wrong, but because they conflict with religious doctrines, and people suffer and die. We look at education. Religious schools receive taxpayer money through voucher programs, but they're allowed to discriminate against the LGBTQ plus community. They don't have to follow public curriculum standards. And when students graduate undereducated or traumatized, the state kind of shrugs and says, well, that's their religious right. And this goes beyond institutions. Business owners claim they don't have to serve certain customers because of their beliefs or their lifestyle, their sexuality. Employers demand the right to deny contraception coverage to their workers. Judges, pharmacists, government officials, they've all refused to do their job, taxpayer-funded jobs. Those taxpayer-funded jobs, they're not doing them because of their personal religious objections. I mean, imagine if an atheist said, my conscience won't allow me to serve a Christian, or I don't believe in your religious holidays, so I'm not giving you time off. We'd be dragged through the media, sued, fired. But when a Christian does it in the name of faith, the system bends to protect them. That is not equality, that's religious privilege, and it's being normalized. And it's getting more and more extreme from what I can see. Taxes, that's a huge relevant topic. Churches pay nothing, zero, despite raking in millions, sometimes billions of dollars, owning massive properties, broadcasting political messages, endorsing candidates, actively lobbying the government. They pay no taxes. Meanwhile, working people are struggling under the weight of a system that treats megachurches like charities while taxing food and medicine. Who decides what qualifies as a religion? The state does, which means the government is already in the business of picking whose beliefs count and whose don't. Religious freedom is supposed to mean that you can believe what you want without interference, not that your beliefs give you the right to harm others or deny them service or exempt yourself from the law. Once their beliefs become a legal shield, it stops being a personal conviction, it becomes a political weapon. And if we allow religion to function like a parallel legal system, then we're not living under the rule of law, we're living under the rule of selective law. Some people's gods speak louder than other people's rights. That's not freedom, that's theocracy. That's theocracy. I was thinking about how the psychological toll as well that's being woven into this because of the apocalyptic stuff. I talked about it briefly, but I just want to expand on it for a minute. There is an overlooked connection that we're often not talking about enough between the rise of this political extremism and this very old religious idea that we know of as the apocalypse. Millions of Americans, especially in evangelical circles, are raised to believe that the world is doomed, that humanity is broken, that suffering is part of God's plan, and that one day soon the righteous will be saved and everyone else will be judged, punished, or destroyed. And again, that's not just background noise. That is a core doctrine in powerful voting blocks, in political movements, and in media empires. And it comes with significant psychological consequences. This apocalyptic thinking doesn't just teach people the world is ending. It teaches them to not care if it does. It numbs their compassion. It almost breeds fatalism. It says, why fight climate change? God's going to destroy this earth soon anyway. Why build systems of justice when only God can bring ultimate justice? Or why worry about democracy? The real kingdom is in heaven. And those belief systems discourage people from engaging with reality. Or worse, I guess you could say, they're actively cheering on the collapse. That's not spiritual, it's suicidal. It creates citizens who are less interested in problem solving and more interested in prophecy. And it feeds paranoia, because if you believe that there's this cosmic battle between good and evil, angels and demons, God and the devil, and of course, once you bring in, the Democrats, Republicans, like it's all a cosmic battle. It's playing out on every headline. And every political disagreement becomes spiritual warfare. The other side isn't just wrong. They are agents of Satan. And that's how we end up with parents calling their kids possessed because they're queer, or school boards accusing librarians of grooming, or voters demanding authoritarian leaders because God is using them to fight the devil. We want a guy like Trump because he's going to help us to bring in the righteous state that we've been waiting for. And that mindset makes it impossible, absolutely, utterly impossible to have rational debates. You cannot rationally debate with someone who is in an apocalyptic mindset. They can't compromise. You can't negotiate with the end of the world. You can't reason with someone who thinks that your very existence is a threat to the divine order. You can't build stable institutions when millions of people believe those institutions are part of a satanic system destined for destruction. The personal toll is almost just as severe. It's like you grew up in these belief systems, and it leaves people, individuals, with trauma. We talk about that a lot on my channel: fear of hell, the shame around sexuality, a warped sense of guilt, distrust of the world, chronic anxiety about your worth. And when political movements tap into that fear that's in each individual person and kind of put it together in this big national package, they're creating followers who are loyal, not just because they're empowered, but because they're terrified. Christians are terrified. The apocalyptic belief systems aren't just breaking their minds, they're building cults. They're training people to obey without questioning, to submit, to wait for salvation from above instead of fighting for justice on earth. And they make people susceptible to charismatic leaders who promise order, revenge, or redemption, no matter how much violence or oppression it takes to get there. We don't need to be saved from the world. We need to save the world from the people who believe it should burn. I'll say that again. We don't need to be saved from the world. We need to save the world from the people who believe it should burn. The future is not written in prophecy. It's written in policy and organizing and science and community and courage. And the moment we stop believing that destruction is destiny, we can start realizing that change is still possible. We can do this, people. We can do this. But we got to get rid of the apocalypticism. When we look at the hope to build a secular moral framework, we look at a big uphill battle. It is a persistent lie in American culture, this idea that without religion, there simply cannot be morality. Without God, people have no reason to be good. If we take away the Bible, we take away kindness, compassion, integrity, and justice. It's not just insulting, but it's false. And it's time to say clearly to the world, you do not need religion to be moral. In fact, some of the most moral people that I know and moral people in the world are non-religious. Atheists, agnostics, secular humanists, skeptics, scientists, freethinkers, people who choose to do good, not because they're afraid of punishment or hoping for a reward, but because they simply understand that other people matter. Our actions affect other people. That kind of empathy isn't supernatural. It's human. It's neurological. It's beautiful. And I would argue that eventually it is easy to spread it. It becomes the kind of thing that's contagious. You see people wanting to love on people and to care for people just because they want to. I'm not loving someone or showing care for people or helping the poor or helping the immigrant because I have to, but because it's a privilege and I get to. And the secular moral framework starts from this basic idea: suffering is real. And if we can reduce suffering, if we can increase well-being and freedom and safety and joy and opportunity, then we should. Not because God commands it, but because that's what it means to live in a society, to be alive and aware and responsible for each other. I will be my brother's keeper. Not because of God, but because I want to, because I care. It's rooted in reason, in evidence, in cause and effect, in asking, what are the consequences of this action? Does it help or harm? Does it promote justice or oppression? And if it harms, we fix it. Not because it's a sin, but because it's wrong. And this isn't some cold robotic philosophy. It is deeply compassionate. This is about ethics that evolve as we learn more. It's about consent and reciprocity and fairness and dignity. And unlike religious moral systems, which are often static and locked into these ancient texts, secular morality grows. It changes with new information. It adapts to new contexts. It learns. Think about many of these so-called moral truths that we hear from Christianity that were once justified by their religion: slavery, child brides, child marriage, execution of non-believers, subjugation of women, criminalization of gay people. All that was once morally right according to Scripture. But secular ethics challenge those ideas, and change the world. Secular morality is not perfect, but it's accountable. You can debate it. You can test it. You can improve it. You can look someone in the eye and say, this is wrong and here's why, without quoting any verses. And the beautiful part of it is you don't have to abandon meaning or purpose. You can still find all in the universe. You can still build community, still celebrate life and love and death and art and joy and grief, all without pretending it comes from a divine command. You can build your own values, your own code, your own legacy. When someone says, without God, there's no morality, you can say, without God, there's no excuse. No excuse to ignore suffering. No excuse to hurt others in his name. No excuse to stop growing as a species or as individuals. Morality does not need to be handed down from a mountaintop. It can rise up from within us, from our minds, from our hearts, from empathy. Empathy is not a sin. For goodness sake, empathy is not a sin. Our morality can arise from that and from solidarity, from the shared truth that we are here together right now, and that how we treat each other is all that really matters as we try to care for our neighbors and leave this planet better than we found it for our kids. I wanted to mention just one last big thought, and then I'll wrap it up with a sort of an conclusion. We hear all the time that people say when something bad happens, thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers for that tragedy. We need action. I hope that's stating the very obvious to all of us, but we need action. When disaster strikes, when rights are stripped away, when people are suffering or scared or angry, this response of our thoughts and prayers are with you is not what we need. What we need is action, because prayer without action is just performance. And that's what we see. These people are just acting. They're just performing to get the votes. It's a way to look like you care without actually caring, without doing anything. It's a way to delay the change, to dodge the responsibility, to pacify the people who are demanding real solutions, and to make yourself look good. Maybe with the religious people, get some religious points, some brownie points. But it's often a way of saying, just leave it to God, instead of standing up and fighting back ourselves. And in this country where our lawmakers have wrapped themselves in religion and prayer has become a substitute for policy, where children get shot in classrooms, we get prayer. Women lose their right to control their own bodies, and we get prayer. The planet burns, communities suffer, hate crimes rise, and we get prayer instead of solutions. It's a smokescreen. Prayer is not governance. It doesn't fund schools. It doesn't protect civil rights. It doesn't lower insulin prices. It doesn't stop police brutality or restore voting access. Laws do, budgets do, organizing does, protesting does, voting does. Prayer is not part of it. It's not a plan. It's a pause. It's a distraction. And right now we don't need that. We need pressure. If prayer motivates someone to be kind and compassionate, that's fine. That's them. If it brings in personal peace, great. But when prayer becomes the only thing that's offered in the face of injustice, it becomes complicity that you've just sort of, dressed up in virtue. It becomes a tool of silence that, we're demanding action, right? We're demanding that this world become more just for the people who are hurting. They're trying to silence us. And so they use this as a tool of silence to tell us to be quiet, to be patient, to calm down, to wait for a higher power. We can fix this ourselves. And, prayer, I think in this context, reinforces powerlessness, right? It trains people to hope instead of to act, look upward instead of outward or inward, to wait for the miracles instead of building movements. And that's, again, this is all about control. That's how control is maintained. Convince people you're too small to change anything. Just pray and obey. But history clearly tells a different story. Real change, real revolutions, rights movements, justice systems, they don't come from prayer. They come from people rising up, people who say, enough, we're done with this. People who march, who organize, who vote, who risk, who refuse to settle for symbolic gestures. That's what this moment demands. We don't need passivity disguised as piety. We're not looking for prayers for a better world. We're looking to build one. Work hard to build a better world. We're not looking to surrender to some divine will. We're looking to be responsible, collectively and personally, responsible for human impact. We want this world to be beautiful for ourselves and especially for the next generations. We want a world that's more just, more free, more compassionate. You can't kneel your way into that. You can't kneel down at the foot of the cross and make it happen. You have to get on your feet and work hard for it. Get your shovel out and dig. Get your megaphone out and get your voice out there. This is a time to say, this is not a country for kings or saviors or excuses. It's just not. So here we are. Some of these topics we could go on for hours, and I'm going to do more of this in the future soon. But some of these topics, they cut through the noise. To me, at least, they cut through the fear and this carefully crafted illusion that we're being fed every day, which is just shoving it down our throats. We want to keep talking about how religion is being weaponized, how fear is being manufactured and used against us, how democracy is being dismantled, not just with tanks and coups, but with pulpits and policy. Pulpits and policy are undoing our democracy. When you look at stuff like, again, the apocalyptic thinking, the blind obedience, the political Jesus cosplay, they're just being used to justify cruelty and control and chaos. But we are not powerless. We don't need kings, not earthly kings, not heavenly kings, not imaginary kings, not ancient gods invoked to justify modern oppression. We don't need to be ruled. We need to rise. Because if freedom means anything to us, and I know it means so much to us, we are so privileged, and we want to cling to this and spread the word more and more that freedom counts. And other countries that don't have freedom need it. We need it now desperately, just like everyone else. But it means the right to think for yourself, to speak the truth freely, even when it's unpopular, to reject the sacred lies and the holy excuses, and to demand a government that serves the people, not prophets. We do not need prophets or saviors. We need solidarity and clarity and courage. And that, to me, starts with refusing to be manipulated by those who speak in the name of God while acting like a tyrant, and seeing through the myth of this divine authority garbage. And it goes to asking real questions and demanding real answers. And if the world feels heavy right now, it's because it obviously is. But we're not here to be spectators. We're not here to wait for permission. We're not here to bow. We are here to build. So I hope that as you think about this, and certainly I hope that there's a lot more rallies, peaceful rallies, but I hope that our voices just get stronger and stronger. Let's take our frustration and our anger and our fear and confusion and turn it into a way to fuel our imaginations for how we can make this world a better place, and to speak out, to show up, to support each other, to vote, to organize. To remember, we're not waiting for Jesus or God to fix this. We're not waiting for some wonderful Messiah-like president. We're waiting for us. We're the ones we've been waiting for. No kings, no thrones, no theocracies, no excuses. Us, we the people. So please keep talking about it. Please keep educated. Please keep organizing. Please keep doing everything you can. I want to do more, and I'm going to do everything I can. As some of you know, I've got some things in my life that have been I've had to focus on, and they're critically important for me at the moment. But as much as I can, I want to get involved. As much as I can, I want to speak out. As much as I can, I want to expose the lies. And as much as I can in the long run, I want America to be the kind of place where people really are safe. And this stuff just eats me alive. And I know it eats you alive too. A lot of you give me a lot of messages about it, asking me what I'm doing, what I can do. I'm brainstorming different things that I can do more with my platforms. I'm not sure how long, who knows, that platforms for atheists might not last that long. We don't know. We don't know what the future holds, but while we can shine our lights, let's do it. While our candles burning, burn it bright. And let's tell the world that we will not bow. We will not go quietly into that dark night. We will make it known that we do not want kings. We do not want monarchs. We do not want authoritarianism. We do not want a terrorist for a president. We do not want a Nazi for a president. We want a president that is going to actually care and have compassion for all people, who tells the truth and who will not harm his own citizens, and who is more focused on serving the people than being a force of power and just trying to collect more power. What do men in power want? More power. We see that playing out every single day, and it's sick. It's sick beyond words. But I'll do my best. from my side, I hope you will too. And I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for being a part of my community and my life. Thank you for your encouragement. Let's keep doing what we can. I'm going to end with just looking at a few quick comments here. Let's see here. The early Christian community encountered challenges, including instances where individuals exhibited reluctance to engage in labor, anticipating the imminent second coming of Christ. Yeah. And I've interviewed some different cult people in Christian cults where they were told, like, don't go to school. Like, you're not going to get through even one semester. You'll get through another month and then it's the end of the world. And, month after month, year after year goes by and he's not back yet. Greta says, I as well, when I was a fundamental Christian, I expected Jesus is coming and didn't care about certain things because in the end it didn't matter. Yeah, the apostate sisters are awesome. I've interviewed them and they've interviewed me. So great stuff. My understanding was that the president's position is divinely ordained and that political involvement was not considered appropriate for Christians. Yeah, I think a lot of people would have aligned with that. Thank you, Joshua. I'm so glad that I deconstructed my former faith. Yeah, I'm so glad too, Greta. And if you do want to reach out at some point, again, my Facebook handle is Harmonic Tim. Feel free to add me and reach out there when the time is right for you to share your story. Let's see here. Peter Thiel thinks Greta Thunberg is the Antichrist. I haven't heard that, but I wouldn't be surprised. That's pretty crazy. Filling out your election mail and ballot. That's great. This is a global phenomenon with Christianity, with Christian nationalism. World's democracies are at stake. Agreed. Yeah, I'm talking about it, of course, from my side because I'm here in the U.S. But this is the people in the U.S. also don't intend to stop at the U.S. They intend to go worldwide. There's no end to this. This is a virus that will not stop at any boundary. They want to take over everything, everywhere. It's crazy. Yeah, we'll do everything we can. Thank you so much, Greta. No gods, no masters. Thank you for having the transgender community in mind. Absolutely. My heart is broken for those who are hurting from that. That's just, it's insane, the grief that they're, I'm sure, going through. Good stuff. And vote for Tim. Thank you so much, Stephanie. I appreciate you being here. Disillusioned Pony Tricks, great to see you. I have a king and queen living with me who have 4 legs each. They make too many demands. Yeah. Thank you, Stephen. Great to have you here. And great to see your eyes opening, heart aligning. Agreed, Stephen. Tim's back. Thank you so much to everybody. I appreciate you all so much. Sorry, I've been, again, incognito. I'll just end by saying I'm going to be doing more live streams. It's going to be off and on for the next week, but the week after there's going to be probably 3 or 4 in 1 week. I'm trying to do it much more actively and much more consistently. So feel free to chime in, and please do check on my channel if you haven't subscribed yet. If you're watching but haven't subscribe and hit that little bell so you can see when things pop up and say, oh, Tim's going live in a minute. But I appreciate your support. Let's keep this conversation going. Thank you all so much and have a great evening. Talk to you soon.